Hi, Jenny. Thank you for joining us today. How's things?
Hey, Paula. I'm really well, thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to having a chat with you today.
Yeah, I'm excited. This will be a great conversation, Jenny. Now, what we do with our guests first up is we actually just ask them about their journey into early learning.
Hmm.
Are you able to share your journey with us today?
Sure. So it's been a long journey so far, 28 years and counting. Um, I started off initially completing my Bachelor of Early Childhood Education straight out of high school. And from there, I've pretty much worked in the sector my entire life. I've held every possible role that you can think of, from Centreland all the way up through to executive level in corporations. So really love working with passionate people. I've seen a lot of change in the sector in the 28 years. We've still got quite a few pain points that we were talking about 28 years ago that we're still talking about today. But I've spent most of my career in leadership roles, managing groups for approved providers across local government sector, private and for-profit sector as well.
Wow, what a journey, Jenny. Is there anything in that journey that you went, that was a turning point for me? This is something that I could see I wanted to do, or I could make a difference.
Definitely. I think when I was working in local government, I worked with a lot of the planning team in the council planning department, speaking with developers about opportunities to build childcare services in the region that I was working in. And I saw the opportunity to work with those developers around concept designs that give children better opportunities and success in early childhood services. So things like the size of classrooms, the design of the play spaces, the facilities for the children. And I think that passion has not left. That's where I'm currently spending a lot of my main role now, in working with developers as we continue to grow young academics,
Yeah.
in really getting involved in the design of services prior to them being built.
That's fantastic, because at the end of the day, it impacts our next generation and
It
how
absolutely
they
does.
perceive the world.
Absolutely does, yes.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that with us. Now, when we first discussed the episode, we talked about the importance of distributed leadership at young academics. Can you give us an introduction to what that means for you?
Yeah, I think for myself and my team, we really focus on the distributed leadership model being a collaborative approach where everybody in the business is invited to contribute to where the company's going, and what we're going to achieve. I feel that with everybody on board with where the journey is headed, and everybody's in alignment with where we want to go, we tend to have greater success. I see distributed leadership really as not one person having all of the knowledge in an organisation, and actually identifying and pulling together people within a team that have the knowledge and the skill set that you need to achieve your goals. It's empowering our team to feel confident to provide suggestions. I'm not definitely the person in the business that has all of the knowledge, and you need to draw on your team members for that to be successful.
Yeah. Can I ask you, Young Academics is a large organisation with lots and
Yeah.
lots of early learning services. When
Mhm.
you're talking about distributed leadership and getting that input from everyone,
Mm.
is it time consuming? How do you manage the time
Yeah.
and make people want to contribute?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. I think we've spent the last 12 months really focusing on distributed leadership models with our centre managers and our three centre leads. So in our centres, we've got a centre leader, centre manager, an assistant centre manager, and the educational leader. So there are three leadership key members in our services. So we've spent the last 12 months really building this distributed leadership model with them so that they can impart their skills and knowledge and learnings on their teams.
Right.
So we're kind of teaching from the top down, but we're seeing the results from the bottom up. And you do have to invest the time, especially if you're changing the leadership model and you're introducing a new model. So we came across people saying things like, well, I need to ask your permission. You need to say yes or no. So it's taking the time to give them the time to practice using the model, and feel confident in the decisions that they're making.
Yeah, because I can imagine right down to your trainees in a centre, they may not be confident to, which, look, in honesty, all of us have a fear of, is it a silly question?
Yeah,
Am I going to get in trouble? That's
yeah,
something that obviously, we hope that doesn't happen in that next generation of children, because we're teaching that
That's right.
that lack of fear. But obviously, you've got trainees and things that are still in that. How do you encourage them to come? Is that a skill you teach to your centre managers on how to get the best out of their team?
Yeah, so I can give you an example of one of the activities that, well, not an activity, but one of the focuses that we had with our centre managers. Part of distributed leadership in our organisation is really identifying where the gaps are, and then bringing the team together to find out what the solutions need to be. And the solution part of it for us is where I find it very effective in bringing people's ideas together to the table. Once they've contributed their ideas on how we're going to solve the problem, then they're more inclined to actually solve the problem and get to the outcome. But so we identified with our leaders, centre leaders, that they were really managing their teams as opposed to leading their teams. So they were managing the day-to-day tasks, set a task, have the task completed, follow up on the task, give feedback. But they weren't actually empowering their centre staff to take ownership of their own responsibilities, their own expectations, and what it is that they could achieve. So we, once we identified that gap with our centre managers, we did some work around setting a leadership framework for them to roll out in their services. So allocating tasks to specific tasks or focus to the assistant centre manager and as well as the educational leader. And then they would go across down into their teams and work with their teams to deliver those outcomes. So it's finding the gap, finding the solution, and empowering people to collaborate, but also it's okay if you make a mistake. We're not talking about big decisions here. We're not talking about whether we, buy a business or sell a business. We're talking about how do we want our daily routine to run. And it means then that each centre's classroom can then be making their decisions without going back up to the centre leader as well. So it frees up their time to be leading as opposed to managing those daily tasks.
Yeah, and I suppose when you look at that model, what you're doing is actually teaching leadership skills to those who may not necessarily have thought they would have had it to start with, or that they didn't feel empowered enough to do it.
Absolutely. And I think it also, because it's a collaborative approach, it stops the natural hierarchy that we have in classrooms of you're the team lead, therefore you make the decisions. Once the teams are really effective at it, they get to understand where they can make decisions on a day-to-day basis without having to go and seek clarification from their team leader. It might be, we're going to push morning tea back by 10 minutes. Could be simple things like that, but it just means that there's trust in the decision-making process and there's trust in the knowledge in the classroom or within the service. And so therefore, people are willing to make those decisions. I often ask teams when I'm out in services, I often say to them, tell me your thinking behind this, activity or program or decision that you've made. Because you don't want to go into an environment and ask somebody a question based on an assumption that you've made. And that's a wrong decision. I wouldn't have set that up that way. That activity doesn't work that way. I've done that before myself, right? You're going in and saying, tell me about your thinking. Tell me about why this activity is in this location and blah, blah, blah. And it takes team members a while because, first of all, when you ask somebody a why question, they get defensive straight away.
And they think they've done the wrong thing, right?
That's right. As opposed to them, but now they understand that when you're asking, you're actually just asking them to validate their thinking and to talk you through how they got to that decision. And often at the end of the day, it makes sense how they got to that decision, and there's no right or wrong whether the outcome was right or wrong. Does that make sense? Yeah.
And I suppose the right out of it is they actually gave it a go.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. If you're going to use this model, you have to let go. You can't. It's hard.
I'm actually feeling the stress for you, Jenni. How was that in those first few months to go?
Yeah. But look, and again, this model has to work with we call it freedom within a framework. It's a term that people use a lot, but there is a framework, and there's also levels of decision making that sit within your roles and capabilities. So where it's still safe in that people are making decisions that are related to their work and not related to other parts of the business, obviously. But we also have really strong non-negotiables, and they're things around compliance, child safety, where it doesn't matter what your opinion is. This is the way that we're doing it at Young Academics, and you actually don't get to decide to do it differently. I mean, you're all about compliance, right? So that's the non-negotiable stuff.
I'm hearing you very strongly there, and I love the fact that's what it is. It's actually a non-negotiable around that child safety, and I know everyone's got different opinions about it. You know, we know that, but we don't have a choice. I don't have a choice. You don't have a choice, right?
And I think we focused very heavily on making sure that our educators have access to understanding why our non-negotiables are non-negotiables. So if it's a policy procedure, it's linked to a regulation, it's linked to a quality outcome, it's linked to the NQS. They understand that that's the reason why it's a non-negotiable. It's not just because we're being fussy. So the working directly with children record is one that a lot of educators will be like, oh, I forgot to sign in. You know, I forgot to sign out. It's like, yeah, but you just don't get to forget. Like, you have to do it because it's a legal requirement.
It's like brushing your teeth every day. You just got to do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now I know we've been talking like in a lot around how it works in a centre, the great outcomes of it, and some challenges. Is there any other challenges that organisations considering this model and the changeover might like? Let me start that question again. What challenges? Actually, I'll give Lloyd a second to. Okay. What challenges might organisations face when adopting this leadership model, and how can they be overcome? And what's your experience around that?
Yeah, I think, as I said earlier, I think it's really making sure that you're explaining the change in the leadership. Because if people don't understand why all of a sudden they have some freedom to make decisions, they get nervous and they'll still check in about whether they've done the right thing or they've not done the right thing. I've got staff in my senior leadership team that I call set and forget. So I can just talk to them about what I need and what we want to do, and I just know that they're going to go and deliver it. I have other staff that come into that senior leadership team that we need to support to understand the freedom within that framework. So I think that's the biggest thing is getting them to understand the difference in the leadership style, still having very clear boundaries of what you can and you cannot, what is in your decision-making realm. And then also providing people to sit at the table with other departments, for example, if we look at a head office function, welcoming them in for collaboration so that you can see the skill and knowledge that you have across the organisation and not just relying on one department. So, for example, don't rely just on marketing to deliver our curriculum messaging. Let's bring operations to the table. Let's bring our quality compliance people to the table. And once you start creating that collaborative space, the distributed leadership it falls into place.
So, and that's really, it's just getting that I suppose the information across and the understanding of that information.
Yes.
And like you said, being very clear, I suppose, about what is a negotiable and what isn't. And then is there? Do you find also that there's I suppose a miscommunication or a lack of understanding that not everything is negotiable? Do you find that along the way?
Yeah, I don't think so in our sector. I think because we have always been so compliance driven, I think that from that legal standpoint is, but I do know that I can give you an example of our programming model. When we were redesigning our programming model, we brought in lots of different people from across the centre land to help us create what that would look like, how it would feel, what was our intentionality around our program, and how are we going to be able to work with our educators to understand how to complete it. And so because you have that freedom of contribution, and I have to say that is the key, the collaboration and the contribution, people then, they understand why you're doing it. And so that there's no barrier there.
Yeah.
But I was just about to say something and I've forgotten what it was. The shared understanding is really important. So we also talk in Young Academics a lot about shared understanding. If we have a shared understanding of where we want to go and what we want to deliver, and you're talking about that shared understanding often, then it's easy to make a decision. So if you're looking at, are we going to go with program format A or program format B, and we know what our shared vision is for programming within the organisation, we'll all automatically agree that Program A is the way that we would like to go. We just did some work recently with our marketing team around and our quality and compliance team around our program offering. And we were talking about, do our parents really understand what we offer? We know what we offer. Do our parents really understand what we offer? And so we realised that we had a gap there. So there's the gap that we've identified, that actually our parents probably don't know how awesome our program is. Yes, we say what we do on our website. How else can we share that with them? And so we just brought a group of people together from operations, marketing, everybody in together. We talked about it, and everybody went off and then came back with a plan of, well, this is how I can communicate now with families, and I think this is the messaging that we should have on our website. And so as a collaboration, we're redesigning what that looks like.
And that's the shared understanding as well, isn't it? That's that everyone working from the same space.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, along that journey and along that change in those immediate few months to that leadership model, did you find people didn't like it?
Yes, definitely.
I was thinking there was probably some people who really didn't like having that decision making shared.
And some people still don't, and that's okay. If you're talking about a classroom or a centre environment, if you've got your key 3 leaders empowering their teams and the room leaders to work, it doesn't necessarily have to be that the new trainee that's just started in the sector, just finished high school, has to understand that model, but they have to know that by true osmosis, they'll start to do it anyway.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, but still, we do understand that people still like to be told what to do, be given this is what my expectations are, and I need the outcome. Yeah.
And this is where we're heading to, because that's sort of how we've been trained through school to a degree as well, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So
if you think about how we work with children, when we work with children, we are literally adopting this model. I often say to teachers and educators, if you're sitting at the front of a group time experience and you think that you're the holder of knowledge in that experience, then you're not teaching the right way. All you'll do is merely stating facts that the world already knows, right?
Yeah.
Teaching is about getting children to be curious and creative and test theories, and not to be given the answer to a question. What dog is this a dog, yes or no? Or what animal is this, a cat? Like, that's not engaging for children.
No, because they know that already.
That's right. It's like, well, like I'm 5, I know that's a cat. But as teachers, sometimes you naturally fall back to that questioning technique. And I know in the school system, it's a lot about what the testing is. It's like, let's ask if you can get the answer right. Whereas in early childhood, we don't teach like that. We teach for that exploration.
Yeah, and curiosity.
That's right.
Getting that, which is when and in fact, what you're talking about, that leadership model really then does engage that, doesn't it? So naturally, your leaders and your educators will be doing that with the children.
That's right. And when they realise that that's the same, it's easier for them to actually slot into taking that leadership model.
Yeah. So in fact, that leadership model that you've engaged in with your staff is really impacting right down to your children. And even when they go back home, those children will be imparting knowledge back with their families.
Yes.
Wow, that's fantastic, Jenni. What a great success for you guys.
Yeah, it's been really great. We're always on a journey of continuous improvement. We've opened up so many new services in the last few years. We're always looking at ways that we can kind of share the load, take some pressures off people.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Now, what role does communication, and I know we've sort of talked about this across those last couple of few minutes.
Yeah.
What role does communication play in the success of distributed leadership? And how would you advise the leaders, the team leaders, to facilitate that open dialogue across their teams?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to focus on is the alignment of the messaging and the intent. So we talked about shared understanding. To be able to make a decision and to make the decision that's in the best interest of the business, you have to really communicate what the intended outcome needs to be. You don't necessarily have to tell people the path to get to that intended outcome, but the intended outcome might be, we have to deliver 5 new services in a 12-month period, right? Now, my team will then go away and map out what that looks like for each of their divisions, each of their departments, and then they will come back and we will re-meet and we'll rediscuss. So having those touch points again, right, how are we heading on those 5 new services that we're opening? Where's our gaps? All right, so then we identify the gaps and then we go back and we work. They go off on their own and they find their own solutions to their problems, and then they come back. And so that's that constant rechecking in on how are we going to get to that outcome, and are we on target to get to that outcome?
Yeah. And I suppose, once again, it's all about having that vision as well, to be, like you were explaining earlier, having program A or B.
Yes.
Naturally, you're going to be leading towards program, the outcome of A or B or whatever.
Correct.
Whatever.
And I think where this model really works is if we just talk a little bit about the new centres that we are opening. We have a really, so this is structured, but distributed leadership works really well. We have a really structured delivery plan that we roll out for new service, and it goes over a 4-month period. And everybody in the business has their part in contributing to the outcome of that service opening. And so just by having that rollout plan, they know when they need to start actioning their work associated with. So, for example, if it's around signage for a new site, I don't have to coordinate people organising the signage. I just know it's getting done in the background, because the people who are responsible for contributing to that part of the business,
they know.
They know that, and they know what our expectations are. They know what our design model is. They know, because we've talked about what our branding is, what our brand language is, how do we want to communicate with our families. They know what to present to me for that final sign-off.
Wow, that's so... I find this so fascinating. I love talking about leadership because I know the impact it has on people's lives and our educators and things, because it is about that good outcome and that positive way you do things, right? And it's empowering people. Really excited about what you guys are doing in Young Academics with distributed leadership. It's fantastic. Is there anything you're thinking, I need to really share this? I need someone to know this, whether it be a centre manager, an educator, a approved provider, someone listening who's having a few, issues, thinking, how do I do this, Jenni? What would be my number one first step to do?
Identify the knowledge of your team. Find out where their skill set is and where their knowledge is, and then start with something small.
Easy.
Yeah.
It
is, right?
Yeah,
it is. It's also the other thing yes, there still has to be a final decision maker or a final sign off in any organisation. That's a given.
Yeah, that's a given.
But I will say to my teams when they're presenting to me and they're talking to me about, this, maybe we should do this, maybe we should do that, I will say, this is your area of expertise. So you tell me which one, right? So by identifying and acknowledging their skill, it empowers them to do better and to make decisions that are good for the company.
Yeah, and in fact, we all don't know everything, like you said earlier.
100%,
we can't. It's impossible. And so I figure from that, what you've got is that person who you've just using their skill set, you've actually given them the confidence to use their skill set.
Absolutely. I remember, I'll just give you a quick example. We're every 6 weeks we do centre manager meetings, and my group operations manager, Jackie, and the operations team, they pretty much do the content and set up and run the meeting. I'm just there to, and I remember one session, Jackie was delivering a business change that the operations team had made, and I was like, I wasn't aware of that business change, but it's actually a good one. And I said to her later, I wasn't aware that you were doing that. She goes, yeah, we just decided last week. And so as the leader, you also still have to make sure you're getting involved in what's happening on the ground as well. But she knew it was the right direction for the business to take, and so she went with it.
Wow, that's amazing. Because it's all, I suppose, do you find decisions are also made quicker?
Oh, very much so. Very much so.
Yeah, so the benefits of it, you're not fluffed about.
Absolutely. And again, if you've got your key people in a room that have got the knowledge to make those decisions, let's not tie it up in red tape. Let's just pick the decision that we want and roll it out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm sure your experience through local government and things like
Yeah.
that also taught you, let's make decisions quick, right?
Absolutely. I loved working for local government, but yeah, red tape was a nightmare.
It's interesting, isn't it? Look,
Yeah.
now, what do you feel are the big topics facing the sector over the next sort of 2 to 5 years?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting time. I think the big piece at the moment is obviously the worker retention payment that's being rolled out at the moment, and whether services are going to sign on for the multi bargaining agreement or do their own enterprise agreement. That funding goes for 2 years, so there's a little bit of pain in the sector at the moment about what comes after that. And of course, there's also the worker undervaluation reviewing at Fair Work at the moment as well. So I think those two pieces are going to have the biggest impact on our sector for like in the last 5 or 10 years in terms of potential change. I think the sector's excited about having higher pay for our team members. We think it's definitely well overdue. But it's, I suppose, the ability for it to be sustained long term. That's going to be the interesting part. And I also think the ongoing issue with attraction and retention of staff. We have a very high turnover rate in our sector. Attrition is a pain point in any organisation. So we're really focusing on making sure that we're giving our teams everything they need to stay where they are. So training, resources, employee value propositions, so that we can make sure they're happy working with us and that they stay.
Yeah, and have you seen a change in that with your leadership model?
Definitely. I think definitely. We have staff now that feel powerful in their roles. They feel that they can embrace what they would like to do in their classroom. There's nothing worse than having a classroom and not being allowed to have it set up the way that you would like it as the teacher or the educator in that room. And just having that, again, that freedom within a framework. I'm not going to tell you how to display your artwork. That's your baby. You run with it. And that makes people happy to be at work.
It does, and that's in anywhere, right? That can be applied. If we've got people listening who aren't even in the sector,
Yeah.
this can be applied across any business or any sector at all.
Yeah.
So look, that's fantastic. Now, before we finish up, Jenny, what we do love to ask is, do you have any personal motivational quotes, wise words that you would love to share with our audience?
Yeah, I think I've got a few, but the one that I'm resonate with at the moment is what you are not changing, you are choosing.
That's
So
very clever.
what you are not changing, you are choosing. So, if you don't like your shoes and you're not changing them, then you're choosing to not like your shoes, right?
Yeah.
And I think the reason I like that a lot is I used to say to educators all the time when I was working directly in services, the practice that you walk past is the practice that you accept. Right? Now, that's a common phrase that's used a lot in our sector now, but so it's kind of the same. It's like you're choosing to walk past that practice and not acting or doing anything to improve it. So it's the same. What you're not changing, you're choosing.
Yeah, and in fact, that's a really powerful quote and a wise words, both of those in our sector, because we're teaching young children, we're learning with young children, we're this is a major player in our next generation. That's exactly what we are. So no, it's fantastic. I love that, Jenny. It's wonderful.
And then I'll share with you. I'm obsessed at the moment with a line out of the Imagine Dragons song "Believe."
Oh yes.
I'm very big on I statements and self-affirmation. So I just love in there. There's a line that says, "I'm the master of my sail. I'm the master of my sea." And I love that, right? Because if I'm in control of my sail on my boat, then I am in control of
where you're going.
Everything else that's happening in my life. And I think that,
Oh, Jill, I have to listen to that song again. Imagine Dragons.
Yeah. It's a great song. It's a great
song. No, we'll definitely listen to that one. Look, and thank you so much, Jenny, for your time today. It's been wonderful to learn about distributed leadership and how it can have such an impact across an organisation. And we really appreciate that you've shared that with us and from a young academics perspective.
Great. Thanks, Paula. I've enjoyed chatting with you.
Yeah, wonderful. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Paula.
See you, Jenny.
Bye.